How the heck are you there, Internet? What do you think of the new backdrop? I've had this for a little while. I used to use it in some of my painting photos, and I don't know if I ever use it in my painting videos, but yeah, let me know what you think. We got some, can you see that? Oh, it looks like you can see that real good. What do we got today? You know what it is, because you saw the thumbnail. Stubby! That's right, y'all. I finally got a Stubby. Finally got some of those classic OG spinner. You know, kind of a classic, like when you think spinners, Stubby is definitely one of the ones you think of. Let's get this right out of the way. 2.3 ounces, 65.6 grams. So Stubby, what do we think of this Stubby? You know, I kind of wanted to get one of these anyway, but especially since I was getting the biting, I figured I owed you guys getting one of these, getting a biting, and then giving you some more thoughts on what was going on. So let's give you some more thoughts on what I think is going on. So first things first, this isn't going to be probably the best review of a Stubby. I'm just putting it out there. One, it is more of a first look. I've only had it for about 24 hours. But I do like to do a first look, and you know, one, it gets more content out there. I find for the most part my first looks line up with what I think after the fact anyway, even though I haven't done a lot of follow-up videos, so look at that shine. So what do we think of the Stubby? Oh yeah, so the reason why this probably isn't going to be the best one, I didn't get this one brand new. I got it used, and I knew going into it that it had a little bit of had a few minor scratches and stuff like that there, as well as the bearing wasn't in really great shape. But I planned on polishing this up again, doing a mirror polish on this, and then doing a mirror polish on the biting, putting a new bearing in here. Probably put a 1 drop in. I feel like this is a spinner that definitely can be smooth. You don't necessarily need a lot of feedback from this, but it comes with a hybrid ceramic in it. When I got it, it was getting 53 seconds on a table spin, a minute and a half, literally 129 and change on a vertical spin. Cleaned it, and I'm gonna do a cleaning video, but let me just let's just pretend we're doing a cleaning video here, y'all. Here's what I do. Warm water, tiny bit of dish soap, spin it around in there a little bit. Good. All right, buttons on. Careful because the buttons will probably be slippery. Spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it for about 30 seconds. Take it out, rinse it in the warm water, get some water in there, spin it, water, spin it until I don't see any little bubbles form. Then warm water, soap, do that exact same step again. Then rinse it, get some water in there, hold it between my fingers, try and make sure I'm getting all the soap out. Spin it, soap, spin it, soap, spin it, soap. Or spin it, water, spin it, water, spin it, water, spin it, water, until I don't see any bubbles. And then hit it with the compressed air or the hair dryer. If you got a hair dryer, I didn't even think of this because I have an air compressor for my airbrush. But if you got a hair dryer that you could turn off the heat setting, that's probably ideal. And really just trying to spin it, maybe a little bit of heat to really try and make sure that it dries out. That's kind of cool. It's like we're in Star Wars and they, you know, the X-Wings go. Excuse me, guys, I'm just wacky. I'm just the old wackadoo. So, cleaned it. Then what do we get? 5 minutes and 21 on a table spin, and 6:45 on a vertical spin. So brought that bearing right back to life. Although it still feels pretty loose and not really that great. Like, yeah, I can't really show you the play. It's hard to show you the play and get the feel for it. It's one of those things you really have to get your hands on to feel. But you can hear it. And you can kind of feel like this looseness in the bearing. So the bearing's definitely going to get replaced, but the gentleman I bought it from, I won't shout out his full name, just for the sake of being polite on the internet, but his name's Jack. If you're on the Daily Fidget, I know you'll see him around. But I think he was impressed because I don't think he got those spin times out of it at all since he had it. So, but it is a hybrid ceramic, so it's going to break in a little bit. But let's talk about this. I'm not going to do kind of a full comparison to the biting because I want to do that in its own video. So let's try and talk about this just on its own. But it definitely feels different. Spoiler alert. It is definitely a different spinner, no question. So I feel even more, you know, when I first got this and I started looking at some of the edges and some of the way this was machined, at first I was like, oh man, maybe this is closer to the biting than I thought. And then I spun it and was like, nope, no, nope, nope, nope. So what do we think about the Stubby? Now again, keep in mind that it doesn't have the greatest bearing in it, and that really affects the feel of it. So take that for what it's worth, but maybe this is what you can expect once the bearing breaks in a little bit if you're not going to be someone who's willing to try and attempt to take the bearing out yourself, because it is, as far as I'm aware, glued in, not press fit. So either way, whether it's glued or press fit, you're probably going to want a bearing removal tool. to take this guy out, but it uses an 8-ball hybrid ceramic. Those cages, I think that part of this is really broken in is when I was cleaning it with compressed air, those cages really slide around a lot. See how the cage is kind of touching the bottom? And now it's touching the bottom. See how that cage just kind of slips around in there? So I don't know if that's part of the looseness as the hybrid ceramic balls have kind of like polished and pushed around the cages, or that's just how the bearing is. I think you feel that cage slide around in there a little bit, which might be part of that looseness feeling. And again, I don't know if that's part of when it's new, but anyway, so this is kind of one of the more expensive high-end spinners, and you've got to wait 6 to 8 weeks. Another reason why I wanted to pick it up secondhand. But it really does, and I don't have a clone to compare to or try, so this is really just, this is the only spinner I have that's really like this. It's got these really nice rounded edges that really give a cool look when you're spinning, and also feel good to stop and to start. They've taken a lot of effort to take just a little bit of extra machining to these corners. Sorry about the hangnail there, y'all. What about there? They're everywhere. But those are rounded just enough to not be a problem. It gives some cool little effects to the light as it kind of bounces around it, but everything's got just a little extra rounding. Like even this right here doesn't come to a hard edge. Like there's just a sort of an extra little secondary like bevel or rounding that happens here. So this is soft. This is obviously very soft. This here is soft. This is soft. Everything, there's a softness to this guy, which lets you grab it and pull. It's got a really good pull. These curves right here, especially since it kind of comes up to a corner, your finger really wants to catch there, so you can really get good satisfying flicks. Maybe not the highest speed flicks, but really good flicks. Really good flicks. Again, I don't think they're quite as high speed maybe as some other spinners the way it catches it, but it's really, maybe it is. It's really satisfying, and I really like the look of the round edge while it's spinning on fast spins. Pulls are no problem any way you catch it. If you catch it on the edge, which your finger really wants to most of the time, especially if you're catching it at an angle, so it has to stop like that. That's part of the trick, right? If you try to jam your finger in there, but let your finger kind of... But either way, I'll just loosen the buttons up a little bit. Either way, whether they're catching it here or on the edge, which again, it really wants to catch on the edges, which is nice. That makes it more satisfying for doing these kind of spins. I think everybody says this, and I might agree a little bit. Probably the only real drawback is the buttons. These remind me of the Triton V2 buttons, in that they're flat. They've got a little edge here, and they're not really all that uncomfortable. If this was maybe a brass one and it was a little heavier, maybe I might feel that way. It's just they're nothing exciting. The buttons don't disappear, so you still notice that they're there. They're not the most comfortable. They're not the most terrible. I like the fact that it has this little divot for doing like spins on the tip of a pen or pencil or something like that. I haven't done it yet. I saw someone, I think it was in the Daily Fidget, it might have been on Spin Space, where they'd taken a paperclip and like bent the end of a paperclip up, so it's the paperclip stood on the table, and they balanced the spinner on a paperclip. Balance-wise, we are very well balanced. Whoops. Let me set my hand down here. So that's more my hand shaking, which you can see by my thumb, but we got really good balance. I don't feel like hardly any flutter. If any, the only thing I'm really feeling is just the vibration from that bearing. Really well balanced. Part of the trick for balancing, right, is you hold it up and move the spinner and see if it stays in place, right? It has to be with the reduced friction of a bearing, you know, for these long spinner times, in order for a spinner really to not have one side really go swinging down like a pendulum where it just wants to always drop this side. You got to be really, really well balanced, right? We're talking the tiniest bit of weight will throw these off, and this really wants to stay. If you really want to know how balanced it is, one, you can feel the wobble when you spin it, but try and just move the arms a little bit and see how well it stays in place, right? Almost any way I put this, it kind of wants to stay there, and it's hard to let go without giving it just a little bit of influence to spin one way or another, but that's an indication that your spinner's balanced. See that? Set it there, it stays where it is. And what it is moving, it's very, very subtle, and it doesn't like swing back and forth, right? So we got a really well balanced spinner. So to have that sort of tolerance, to have a spinner that accurate, to have all these little extra machining and rounding marks, I'd probably have to say it's worth the cost of entry. It's definitely worth what I plan on customizing this a little bit, so I was looking for one that was in perfect condition that I can upgrade and save a little bit of money on anyway. So at full cost and waiting the 6 to 8 weeks, I think that's my biggest problem with the Stubby, to be honest. With the amount they're manufacturing and how many they're coming out with every week, if they can come out with drops every week, then in theory they should be able to also keep up with demand and release stuff every week. Now I know you have to kind of get ahead of it. It's sort of like a, well, it's an analogy I can't really make because it's from an old job that I used to work at. But essentially, if you're behind 30 minutes the entire day, if you could have gotten on time early, you could have stayed on time the whole day, right? So same sort of thing. If you can get ahead, you know, so maybe you just reduce a few drops on the pre-order for a couple weeks, and then I think people would be a lot more excited if they could get it on the Stubby and then know it would ship later that week, right? That's my biggest critique. I get the pre-order drops with some manufacturers, especially, you know, when they're not making quite as many, like that Grave Raven, right? Like, you know, he gets some of the material and then gets those pre-orders out, but it's not like he's coming out with a ton of drops every week. The market's not like flooded with Stubbies, but the fact that, you know, like if you know what you're going to make and you know what's going to sell out, I kind of get what they do. They do the pre-orders that way they can make it and not have a bunch of inventory sitting on hand. But at this point with a Stubby, I don't think it does anything for you. Just my personal opinion. But everything else, I mean, this is worth the cost. It's a quality spinner. It's soft, good spin. You know, buttons really aren't that bad realistically, but definitely this is one of the guys that, with as nice as it is, this is one worth upgrading the buttons on. So we're going to put a mirror polish on this guy. We're going to put a mirror polish on the Biton. Someone mentioned they wanted to see me do the mirror polish on the Biton in a video. I probably, you know, I've already got 2 polishing videos out there, but it sounds like you guys like that. But I'll probably do it on the Stubby, actually. One, because I think more people will enjoy me polishing the Stubby than they would the Biton. 2, probably because more people have a Stubby and maybe are afraid to kind of go in and customize it, especially with as much as it is. And I'm not one to be afraid to just go in and take an expensive spinner, especially now that I've practiced on some other spinners, right? I might not just jump in and heat treat this guy as my first heat treat, but I'm not afraid to give it a heat treat once I've practiced a tiny bit. And same thing now that I've polished and know what I'm doing. And then 3, I think it would be funny to have a video that says polish your Stubby. So I think we're going to polish this guy, and I'll probably just do, you know, a short take at each sanding step as opposed to trying to do like the whole thing, because it's probably going to take a couple hours, and you certainly don't want to see that. So maybe show you a little bit of sanding at the high grits, at the low grits, and then we'll go up from there. So yeah, so stay tuned for a polishing your Stubby video at some point. And then we'll polish up that Biton and we'll give them a side-by-side comparison. But spoiler alert, Biton is a Biton, Stubby is a Stubby. They're 2 totally different spinners. So, but yeah, happy I got this guy. Worth the cost of entry, maybe not worth the wait, I think, with the way the market is and what they could do with the amount of spinners they're working with and selling over there. So yeah, so that's been Hobby Timmy's thoughts on this Stubby. I hope you guys liked it. Yeah, we're inside so we can't get a warp, but we can get a nice little spin. Peace.